Right, picking up from the last lesson that we had, we want to create a new project that I'll go step by step and explain how each element works. So here's how we'll do it. We want to create what are called files. And pretty much what it means with a file, we want to be able to create something that we can be able to use and reference so that we can create an output at the end of whatever we would have created. So what we simply need to do first is we need to know what each and every stage does. So I'm just going to create the 3 common elements of files. With those 3 common elements, I will put the code and explain how each of the code works in a particular instance that it's actually working. So we need to create our variables, which will be as follows. We need a character variable that we'll call C. We would also need a file, which is a keyword that will then have a pointer to that file. So in other words, we then say file recognizes that we're going to be dealing with a separate file outside of our C. So this separate file is what we will then be able to use for whatever it is that we want to work with. And then we've got another variable that we want to work with, which will be our Q, and our Q will be able to give us what we are hoping to work with. I'm actually realizing that with our learning, certain things will need to go over them, certain things will also still need to practice how we can use them. So we'd want to create a fully functional system where it just loops over certain things. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to have a set of printfs, and each printf should give us an output based on what we want to achieve. So the first one should be create, then the next one would be our printf, and this would be our read, and then the next one will be a printf, and this printf will give us the value, or it will give us the append, which is the last aspect of our files. And then lastly, we want to have a printf, and our printf should give us a close, so that we close our program. So since we said we want it to be looped, we'll be able to loop it and see how we can actually repeat certain things as we go along. So the next part that we want to actually now work with is how we'll get the input. So the input will simply use a scanf property, and then this scanf property takes the input from the keyboard, and then we've got our value for Q. From there, we then want to have our loop, which will put a switch, and our switch switches the value for Q. We open and we close brackets, and then we put a couple of case statements. So the first one is case 1, the next one is case 2, the next one is case 3, the next one is case 4, like that. So after each case we have a break, and the break denotes where we end each case. Lastly, one break, that's the last break that we've got. Outside of this, we need a default, which gives us the default element that we would want to work with. Let's just put this to the side so that it looks better. And then we've got a printf, and we'll say invalid input, and the moment we have an invalid input, we want to go back to our main. So we can actually call our main this way. So in other words, we're then saying the moment a person enters any number that's not between 1 and 4, we're just supposed to go back to the main. We do that for the rest of the elements. Namely case number 3, we want to go back to main. When we are done, we do that for case number 2 again. We want to go back to main. When we are done, we go to case number 1. We want to go back to main. When we are done, then for case number 4, we want to be able to put exit in brackets. We'll take 1 so that we know that we have closed our case. So from then on, we then want to actually put some content to this. So this gives us our file write operation. This then gives us our file read operation. This then gives us our file append operation. So these are the different values that we want to work with for our files. So let's be able to create the things that are common in each of these 3 elements. So we'll need to say fp is equal to fopen. We open and we close brackets, we put a semicolon, and then we say fclose in brackets, we then put our fp. So this is common for all 3. So we can just copy that and put it in the file read. We can also put it in the file append like that. So what we then need to do is we want to see what each of these values gives us. So for our file open, we need to have 2 sets of quotations, where the first quotation we put the name of the file that we want to work with. So in this particular case, we're working with text files, and our text files pretty much give us the ability to actually add information to our file. So here's how we want to do it. We want to have a function called file printf, which simply writes to our file, and whatever content we've got in our quotations is what we'll put in our particular file. So we can put 3 options there. We can also do the same for our append, which will almost be the same as our write, but we'll have a difference within the brackets. So we'll want to put content that we'll be able to work with in our file. So I can start with a new line. I also end with a new line, but I then put the content that I wanted to do. File write starts here. Okay, so we then want to put content that we want to work with, whereby we can do the following. We can say sample text, and then the next one we then say, we also put 2 new lines, and we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that, something along those lines. And then we are done with the file write portion. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to do for the file read portion, which will simply have the exact same thing. We can actually copy this and paste it in the file open, and then at that point we actually change that to R. So W stands for write to file, and then R stands for read from file, like that. And then we'll then want to put content that will help us read from our file. So to read from our file, we just need to do the following. Okay. Would want to put a while statement, and this while statement will do the following. We'll then be able to say C is equal to F get C, which is file get character. We open and we close brackets, we put our FP, and outside of that, we want to check if it's not equal to the end of the file. Then we want to print whatever is within our file. So we put a printf, and with our printf, we want to be able to get our character, so it's %C, and we want to be able to print our C. So this then gives us the contents of the file. So this pretty much reads what's in our file. The next thing we want to do is we want to do our file write, or rather our file append, and we build from there. So we simply put an append, and we put some content in our text. So we can put the following, where we say this is our file append, and our file append simply would want to put new content added to file, user gets impressed, like that. So with this, our code is pretty much complete. Hopefully there are no errors with the code. Let's run it and see if it works. Okay, now it's working. So we've got create, read, append, and close. So what happens is if we use read, it will not be able to give us anything because there is no file that is created just yet. And as you can see, the moment I entered 2, it took me back to menu, or it took me back to main, which is why it then gave me that. So if I create 1, I'll be able to create that file. If I select 2, I'll be able to read what's in the file. If I select 4, I'll be able to append. 4 closes. 4 closes our program. If I select 3, I'll be able to append. If I select 2, I'll be able to read. Okay, there is something that is wrong with our code. There's something that is missing with our code. Okay, it's also supposed to create a file. Let's see. Okay, it created our file, which is perfect. So file write starts there. This is what we've got. We've got file append, which is perfect. But it seems like our file read is what is giving us issues. Our file read is giving us issues. okay, while c is equal to f get ch and fp, I think I might know what's happening. Let's just try and do this. Okay, I think I put too many. Like that. Okay, let's just try it like that. I think I realize where, yes, that was our problem. So our problem was with one of these brackets. We're supposed to actually have the first set of brackets, which is these ones, then the second set of brackets, which is those ones, and the third set of brackets, which is those ones. So in other words, we're then saying when we then put our read, we're just supposed to see what each element does. So you'd notice that if I append as many times as is possible, if I go back to read, you realize it just keeps appending and adding to the existing text. But if I select write and then read again, you then actually notice it completely removes everything that was there, and it gives us something that is totally new to what we had before. So in closing, I think we can state a few of the facts that we've got here. When we are creating our files, we create our variables as we know it. The key aspect is having file and then fp, which is the pointer. We want to be able to have q, which is our variable, and we want to be able to have c, which is also another variable. From there, we then want to be able to put each element as it is. So we've got create, we've got read, we've got append, we've got close. So we use our scanf to choose any one of these numbers. And then we've got a switch statement where we switch q, which is a variable that we've created. And we've got case 1, where our case 1 gets us to writing. And we said we write using this particular line, where we say fp is equal to fopen, and then we put the file that we want to actually create, which is notes.txt, and then we put w for write, so that we write to that file, and then we've got fprintf and the file pointer plus the text that is contained in our quotations. We do that for the next 3 lines, and this is what we've got in our file. And then with fclose, we then close our file, and then main takes us back to the beginning. Same goes for our file read. We have our fp equals to fopen, notes.txt, and then we read. And then we've got while c is not equal to fgetc, fp is not equal to end of file. We want to be able to display all the contents within the file. And then we close that file. That's for our read. And then file append, we want to be able to have fp equals to fopen, and then we want to have our notes.txt, and we want to append to that file. From there, we then want to put the content that we want until we are closed. And then case number 4 simply ends our program, and that is what we would have done so far. So that is how we work with our files, and our lesson ends here.